Hello and welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. Today we are talking about product roadmaps, and specifically I'm sharing my 2022 refreshed, revamped and revised product roadmap template and a deep dive walkthrough of that template. There's two reasons why I'm making this video. One is because I made a roadmap video back in 2021, almost 18 months ago. I'll link the video here. And that has been the most popular video on my channel ever. Like, to this day, I get so many views every single day and so many questions and comments and feedback on that video. So I wanted to do an updated version specifically addressing some of the comments and questions that people have raised on that video. And also, because I know it's so popular, I thought it would be relevant to update the template and update the video so that people in 2022 looking for a roadmap can find the most relevant and up-to-date version of it. And the second reason I'm making this video is because since I made the original one almost 18 months ago, I have gained so much more experience as a product manager, as someone working in tech, as someone who has created and presented so many roadmaps over the last 18 months. So I have definitely tweaked my approach to putting a roadmap together. I've changed my mindset around roadmaps. I've changed, slides and content that I would consider putting in a roadmap deck. So there are so many changes that I've gone through that I really want to share with you all, because I do feel like that previous video and template is now a little bit out of date and it's not how I would put a roadmap together today. And I really want to bring you up to speed with how I would do it in October 2022. As usual, I will be sharing my screen shortly and doing a slide-by-slide review and walkthrough of every single slide that will go into this roadmap template. The template I speak of will be completely free and it will be linked down below in the description. The link below will take you to Gumroad and you'll have to put your email address in, and then you will receive a link to the template. Then you'll have to make your own copy of the template and save it to your own Google Drive. So what is a product roadmap? In my own words, well, I do have some notes here. A product roadmap is a plan. It's how you're going to take your product vision and your product strategy, and you're going to make that actionable over a period of time, 3 to 6 to 9 months. Many factors will impact how long your roadmap is. Now, a roadmap is not a firm commitment to deliver something at a specific time. It is very much a direction, in my opinion. Roadmaps can change, and they should always have disclaimers on them, especially if you're sharing them externally with customers, that this is the general direction in which things will be going. But there are so many factors, business factors, technology factors, that can change your roadmap. If you are looking to communicate timelines with people, a delivery plan should be what informs those timelines. A product roadmap is just as much a communication tool as well, that you can use to communicate with other teams, whether it's design, sales, engineering, any customer-facing teams, product marketing, exactly what they can expect of your product over a given period of time. If you spend the time up front putting a roadmap together, it's going to be your one single place and source of truth for the direction of your product that you can easily share with anyone at any time that they need. Now, because things can change in a technology environment specifically, it is important that you review and revise your roadmap at a regular cadence. So for most companies, I think it's quarterly. It could be more frequently for you if you work in a much smaller company or a startup. In fact, if you're in a startup, your roadmap probably isn't very long anyway, because you're probably taking a lot of feedback from customers and sort of pivoting what you do more in real time than a larger company would. I want to share a really quick public roadmap that a digital banking company has put on their website, and I thought this was one really good because customers have a place to see what previous releases and updates the product has had, but also what they can expect in the future. But secondly, I love the way that they have presented this. It's done in a very creative way, and I feel like it makes customers feel like they are part of the development process in some way, because they can share input on the roadmap and they can see at any given time what is happening. And I think it's a really good way to create a community around your product as well. There are some cool products that will allow you to create public roadmaps. My favorite would be Frill, but you can always use something like a Trello. You can get people to vote on the ideas that they have, and you can make that, yeah, fully publicly accessible. But the purpose of this video and the template I will be sharing is very much an internal facing roadmap. Now you may be wondering, Anika, how do I create and prioritize everything that needs to go into my roadmap? And I'm going to give you some tips for that. So first and foremost, remember that just because you are the product manager doesn't mean all the ideas and all the inputs for the roadmap need to come just from you. Your roadmap should be created with input from different cross-functional teams and different stakeholders and people in the business. As a product manager, you're definitely responsible for owning your roadmap, helping to put it together, and being able to justify the decisions for why you are prioritizing what is in the roadmap. But in terms of the decisions for the various bits and pieces of work that you will actually be doing, that requires input from many different cross-functional teams, especially engineering and especially design. Now, here are some of the things that you need to consider when putting together a product roadmap. Number one is your company's mission, vision, and priorities, right? Think of a little triangle like this. Right at the top is going to be the company mission and vision, the really blue sky, long-term stuff. Down from that will be maybe their 1 to 2 year strategic direction or strategic priorities. And then that is going to stem down into individual teams or individual product areas, and your teams and on products priorities will be informed by the broader company's priorities and goals. So you've got to remember that high level direction, because everything you and your product and your team do should really be in support of that. So that is number one. Secondly, and probably most obviously, is customer feedback. Now, if you have a product that already exists, chances are you will have a bunch of feedback from customers already, and hopefully that can help you to inform what you do next. But if it's a brand new product, market research, looking at what competitors are doing, thinking about how maybe your company or your product area wants to do something really innovative and new, or again, maybe customers are asking for something that you don't have. So really taking on that feedback from them as well. Next is engineering. You need to talk to engineering to figure out, apart from features, functionality, and functional requirements, what non-functional requirements does engineering need to put onto the roadmap? These could be things like reliability, stability, performance, technical debt, just general tech tasks. Things that aren't always going to be obvious and visible to the customer, but they are important to maintaining and keeping the lights on with your products. And lastly, underpinning all those other inputs that go into your roadmap, you need to have a really sound understanding of your product area, the market that it's in, the competitor landscape, the industry. Now, the reason for this is, as the product manager, you're kind of like the expert of your product. And a big part of that is understanding like the broader context that it sits in. You need to be able to justify the decisions for why your roadmap is what it is and why you've made decisions to prioritize certain things. And while input from different cross-functional teams is important, a broader, higher level, big picture understanding of the big space, the industry, the market that your product sits in is really important. And that's also going to help show that you are a strategic thinker, which is how you're really going to progress in your product career. Now, there is still going to be a bunch of work that you need to do in order to even put things on your roadmap. Once you have an idea of the general things that you want to do, you've done that market research, you've gotten feedback from customers, etc., you need to spend some time with engineering to get a high-level idea of whether the things that you want to do are actually feasible, the effort involved in them, so that you can inform some kind of high-level timeline. This could involve doing some high-level design mock-ups. It could involve having a proof of concept that helps to validate your ideas and the feasibility of building them. Sometimes I do put items on my roadmap that are more discovery items, so things that we might want to do in the next 6 to 9 months. So we don't necessarily need to know the full scope of details for it now, but we are going to spend some time doing the discovery, doing the research, doing some high-level mock-ups and sort of feasibility assessments with engineering down the track. And it again just gives people an idea of the direction in which we are moving. Welcome to the walkthrough of this product roadmap template 2022. I'm so excited to walk through this for you all. Now, this Google slide file is a view only. So you will have to make a copy of it by going to File, make a copy, entire presentation, and save that into your own Google Drive and then edit it from there. I have to put this information in because all my previous templates are also in Google Docs or Google Slides, and people get very confused about how to access it because you won't be able to comment or edit this file when you first receive it. As you can see, it also says do not edit because you actually need to make a copy of it before you can do that. So that is the admin out of the way. Now let's get to the walkthrough. So as I mentioned in the intro, I have refreshed and revamped the way I put together my product roadmaps. The intention and purpose behind them is still the same, but as I go through each slide, I will share with you what I am obviously proposing in this template, but also why I may have made some changes from the previous template if you did end up using that or watching that previous video. So first and foremost, this is just a title slide. This template is not very pretty by any means, so please change the design as it suits you, but obviously you need some kind of title slide. All right, the next slide is really a recap of what your product has been up to. For context setting and for background, there might be people who are new, there could be people who have forgotten what you've been doing over the last several months or more than that with your product. So before you talk about any of the new stuff you want to do, I think it's really important to just remind people where you're at right now with your product. That could include recapping on any product releases, any big milestones. That could include hitting some key metrics or key goals that you had, any big achievements, maybe customers that you got signed up, whatever it is. Just remind the audience for this, whether that's in a presentation you're doing or someone actually reading the slide by themselves, give them context so they know, okay, this is where you are now. This is almost the current state. And then going forward, you're going to explain to them where you are going. Okay, next slide. Now you'll notice I've put optional on quite a few of the slides, and that is simply because they are optional. I would rather give you more than give you less. So these are skipped slides and they're optional. So use them if you want to, but don't feel like you absolutely have to. But anyway, this slide is really a carry-on from the previous, where once you've provided some context and background and an overview of the current state of your product, you could make that a little bit more visual if you wanted to. This is probably going to depend on the type of product that you have. So if it's an app, if it's some kind of web app, if it's some kind of mobile app, web app, something very visual, I think it can be really nice to show a visual of it. So again, it gives people a nice prompt as to what your product is, and then just a very clear-cut overview of the features, the capabilities. Now you could totally use the format of this slide and change the features to talk about metrics or customers that you've won over, or metrics that you've improved, metrics that you have reduced, whatever it might be. Just kind of take this slide as inspiration for format and really add a little bit of visual elements to it. Okay, I had to turn the light on because I was pretty much sitting in the pitch black. So next slide is also optional. Now you might be thinking, why are we educating the audience here by telling them what makes a good product? So the reason for this is when I present product roadmaps, I like to take people on a journey. I like to tell them a story, and it's really easy for people to have black and white opinions, whether it's from a technical perspective or a design perspective or a business perspective, what your product should do. But you need to kind of educate them, and you need to influence them and bring them on a journey of all the different things that make a product great. So sometimes I like to throw this in here just as a bit of a break in the deck as well, a bit of a break in the presentation that I'm giving, to just say, let's take a step back and let's think about what does make a good product. And as you'll see, this doesn't actually relate simply to product development. I'm talking a lot about value proposition. I'm talking about how the product is marketed, and I'm talking about obviously the pain point that it solves. And this also shows your audience or your stakeholders, whoever is reading or receiving this, that you're thinking about your product beyond just pure development of features, because it is absolutely that. It's the whole package. So you could replace this slide with something else that maybe is more relevant. Again, this is completely optional. Think about maybe who your audience is. If they're very, very experienced product people, you probably don't want to put this in. But if it's maybe a audience that isn't strictly product managers, isn't strictly the product organization, maybe then you could include this. Sometimes you will present product roadmaps with other parts of the company, right? It could be with the sales or go-to-market team. It could be with customer success. It could be with design. And I think for certain audiences, something like this could be relevant. And sometimes also, later in the roadmap, when maybe you're explaining a decision that you've made to prioritize something, and you get a question around why you're prioritizing this, you can always come back up to this slide, right? And kind of use this as a reference point to then elaborate further on why you have prioritized something. So think about it that way. This slide could help you when you are telling that story. Okay, next slide is strategic priorities. Now, I had this in the previous template as well, and this simply alludes to kind of that high level, big picture of what it is that your company or your product area is trying to achieve. Now, that's why these are called strategic, and that's why they're called strategic priorities. This is going to this is definitely going to vary depending on where you work, the size of the company, your role, the size of the team, etc., etc. But for the most part, every given product or company will have some sense of direction as to where they are going. And if they don't, that is a problem. It's going to be very difficult for you to create your roadmap if there isn't some kind of overarching direction or strategic vision for where you're going. So if you don't have that, and if it's a gap, don't work on your roadmap. Go and figure that out first and then come back to your roadmap. But anyway, I think it's important to, again, remind and share with the audience that your product roadmap relates back to the strategic priorities, right? So it kind of goes like this. There's the stuff at the top, which is like your mission and your vision. And that then stems down into product strategy or overarching product direction. And then that could then get broken down into strategic priorities that can then help enable that product strategy and company mission or vision. So think about it like that sort of triangle, and it's good for people to remember what is that overarching goal that we are striving for, because your roadmap should be an enabler of any of the strategic initiatives that are happening in the company. Now, I'm using the word company quite loosely. You know, if you work in a startup, it's going to be quite different. You might not have things set in stone. So you can definitely tweak this wording. Or if you are a very small startup and you don't have strategic priorities, and maybe you're in the process of kind of experimenting and figuring out what it is that your priority or your strategy should be, then that's totally fine as well. Like, again, take this for what it is, and take this and tweak it based on your specific need, okay? Just because it's in the template doesn't mean you absolutely need to use it. Okay, the next slide is goals. So this kind of stems nicely from the triangle, right? So this is the tip of the triangle, kind of. It's very close to the top. And then we're going to stem this down to your product, your goals. Now, again, something that's going to differ from person to person is your product. Do you own an entire product area, which, you know, could be a product portfolio? It could have multiple products in it. Or do you look after just one product? Or maybe you look after a specific feature of a given product. It's going to vary. So keep that in mind. But basically, you need to still have, but regardless, you need to have goals for your product. And the reason I've added this in is because I've realized that if you just present a roadmap to people, you're not explaining the why, right? Anything that you do when it comes to product development or marketing, it's to ultimately achieve some kind of goal. So you will have a goal or a number of goals set for your product. And your goals are set because you're trying to achieve the company's goals, which come back to that strategic priority. So kind of think about that triangle when you're doing this. Now, your goals can be whatever is relevant to you. In this example, I just happen to have goals that are quite business orientated, I've realized. So users, revenue, and retention. But get as specific as you want with this. I like to break up goals into more granular milestones. So that's why I've got like 6 months and 12 months, because a lot can change in 12 months. And it's really good to kind of have a break point to see, okay, where do we think we can realistically get to midway to this 12-month goal? And that can also serve as a bit of a check-in point and a point at which to kind of review and revise and tweak your strategy for how you are going towards achieving these goals. The other benefit in sharing goals is that it can get people really excited, right? If you're just talking about a roadmap in the sense of features that you are developing, it's hard to sometimes relate that back to the bigger picture. Again, it's the why, right? You're kind of sensing a theme here. It's all in the why. So if you put numbers to something, if you say we're trying to get to 10,000 users in the next 6 months, and this is going to bring in $175,000 in revenue. That's exciting. Like, people can see that number and they can kind of go along on that journey with you again for kind of tracking how you'll get there. Numbers excite people, especially if they are big, audacious numbers. And if you hit your goals, guess what? Next roadmap review, you can be sharing those numbers in the achievements, and then you can kind of work on your roadmap from there. Let's get to the actual roadmap, okay? Like, what is it that we are going to be developing? What are the features? What are the new products? Let's get to that tangible stuff. But you can see up until this point, I've really just been laying context in a few different ways. Context in terms of the history of the product and what it has achieved to date, and then also context around that big picture vision and the goals that are going to help you, your product, your team kind of get to those big picture vision items. Okay, next slide. This is also an optional one, but I put this in because I actually used this recently myself when I presented a product roadmap for a startup, and I think it was received well, but it also helped me kind of really feel grounded with where the product is at. So you don't have to use the word phase, but basically what I'm trying to indicate here is you want to show people where you are right now and where you're trying to get to. But you don't want to now just do this in the really, strategic priority kind of way. You want to do this in a very product orientated way. So as an example, phase 1 could be that you're currently in an MVP phase. You've launched the MVP and you've released it to a small user group, right? And you are rapidly accelerating product development so that you can get to phase 2, which is going to be the full go-to-market, generally available launch. And phase 3 could be a little bit more blue sky. So, you want to expand into another market. You want to, expand into another vertical, like whatever it is. If you can kind of paint the picture of purely in terms of product capabilities and product features, this is where you are today and how that kind of sits with where you want to be. But again, totally optional. Now, this is really the tangible stuff. Tell me what we're building and tell me when we are building it, right? This is ultimately what people want to know. So I've changed my approach to this slide, and I have actually now positioned my 9-month roadmaps as what we are working on now, what we are working on next, and what we are going to be working on in the future. And the reason for this is because roadmaps usually come with a pretty big disclaimer that says, timelines do not mean firm commitments. Things happen, things change, development nearly always takes longer than you expect. And I just don't think there is value in committing to like a precise date. I think, yes, it's important to have delivery dates for the development team, but in terms of a roadmap, you can have a general sense of this is roughly the period of time when we should be releasing XYZ. But for the purpose of sharing this with like a big audience, I don't think this needs dates. Rather, what it needs is what you're currently focusing on, right? So the way this slide works is you kind of put your focus here. This should kind of be like a one-liner. Explain your current focus, explain your near term or next focus, and then explain your future, slightly longer term focus. And yeah, you can kind of list the things that you will be releasing, which should include features that you are shipping. It could include reliability, technical roadmap items, all that kind of stuff. If you work on multiple products, you can still use this. So that's what I do. So for example, I could have product 1, and that would have something here. And then I would have product 2. So I'd kind of summarize all my products into this one slide. So you could do something like that. And if you have maybe one product, but it's got like lots of, granular features, then you could, of course, just like have like a feature category or something. It depends how granular you want to get with this. You can basically add subheadings so that you're not just writing like a big laundry list onto this slide. Okay, this next slide is a variation of the 9-month roadmap, in that this slide here is more of a prioritized list of what you want to ship, whereas this is adding a little bit more detail to the priority because it's adding ordering as well, which is essentially what I mean by sequencing, which means, example, your current focus is doing these 10 things, but in what order are you really going to do them? Are there certain things that are going to run in parallel? Are there certain things that depend on something else? Does something have to come before this other thing because there is a dependency, right? So it gives people a really nice visual. I think visuals are always really good to add. So this is quite text heavy, and you're kind of spinning that around. So you've almost got like the vertical view here, and then you've got like the horizontal view here. It's totally up to you how you use this. So for example, you could do it this way, right? Where you add text boxes and you just add your breakdown of each feature or product or whatever the breakdown is that's relevant for you. You could do it this way, or you could potentially do it even more visually. So this maybe could show like how long things take, whereas if you had the text, you could maybe just plot it when it was going to be delivered. So something like this. But just think about a way in which you can take that prioritized list and show people a little bit more of the complexity behind the delivery of it. So I guess this is slightly more of a delivery focused slide, not very detailed though, pretty high level. And you could, if you wanted to, add a little link here somewhere that takes people to like the detailed delivery planning, because there will be some people who are interested in seeing that. The categorization here that I have on the left is going to be, again, dependent on you. So you could break this down by multiple products, like product names. If you look after multiple products, you could break it down by initiatives or maybe just features, totally up to you. And you can also change the timing. If you don't want it in quarters, you could have it in months. If months is relevant to you, if you really need to and want to present a timeline. If you have a timeline that maybe is a little bit more concrete than now, next, future, by all means, add that in and do what the expectation is in your given company or work situation. Okay, next slide. I'm excited about this one. I've added this in. It wasn't in the previous template. And I've added it in for a couple of reasons. Product development on its own isn't enough, right? You need to get the product out there by marketing it. You need to get customers on board, and that's customer acquisition. And there's basically a whole range of go-to-market activities that go into the sort of latter stages of the product development lifecycle. And that's really what's going to get people using it. And I think it's really important on your roadmap to show that you are thinking about those things, that you are working with your product marketing team, that you are working with maybe it's like a branding team, maybe it's a social media marketing team, like whoever your go-to-market teams are. It's important to show that you are not operating and creating a roadmap in isolation, and that you also have activities that are going to enable and accelerate and supplement the roadmap to actually get it out to people who are going to use it. So you don't have to call this slide acquisition. It could definitely be called go-to-market. You can call it whatever you like, but yeah, that's just an example. But think about how you're going to get your product out there now, in 3 months, and in 6 months. You should definitely partner on this with your product marketing person or your whoever is in your go-to-market team. And the reason I've broken this up by in progress and planned is because you're presenting a roadmap which you're probably likely to work on in the future, right? You might not have started working on all the roadmap items you have. You may not also be doing a lot of the go-to-market activities yet because you're not quite ready to do so. And that's why I've got planned, because you want to indicate, look, these are the things we plan to do in order to get the word out in the market about this given product or feature or initiative. That's what we plan to do. And if there are things you're already doing now, then by all means include those. These summary items here are just kind of like the equivalent of this focus. So yeah, what is the kind of focus of your go-to-market strategy here? So I'll probably change that and just say like, summarize your focus for the go-to-market activities. Yeah, something like that I think is a bit more suitable. Now we're almost at the end. So the next slide is recapping on your goals. So we shared the goals up here, right, on slide 8. And now we've talked through the roadmap, we've talked through the sequencing of the roadmap, and we've talked through some of the go-to-market plans. But let's come back to the goals and remind the people watching this or reading this how your roadmap is actually going to help the goals. So you presented the goals, then you presented what you're going to do, and now you want to tell them how those two will actually work together. Look, again, I have this as a bit of a skipped slide. You could definitely just recap on the goals and have some kind of high-level summary if you're presenting this as to how those product development, product roadmap items will help the goals. But if you want to actually have something to show, what I recommend is taking that sequencing slide, is taking that sequencing slide again and adding your goals to it. You can basically rename these little boxes here, rename them to what the name of your goal is. So for example, if it's, I don't know, users, if it's revenue, if it's retention, right, as an example. And then if you have, let's say, as I showed you before, if you have like feature 1 mentioned here, you've got like, I don't know, feature A, B, C mentioned here, whatever it is, you can then take your goals and kind of plop them next to that feature to show this, the development of feature 1 is going to help the user's goal and the revenue goal, if you get what I mean, something like that. You'll have to play around with the formatting of this. It's a bit fidgety, but yeah, basically have your roadmap item in this sequencing diagram and then kind of have a way to tag or label each of those features or roadmap items with the goal. I think it could just be a nice visual way, again, to represent how your roadmap is actually helping your goals and basically just show the mapping. The more directly you can show the mapping, the better it is. And that's pretty much it. The thing that I will end on, I'll just have to move this over, is detailed roadmap deliverables. So this is basically a more deep dive into each of the roadmap items. So for example, if you list some of the roadmap items here, or even if you have like, you know, feature 1, feature ABC, you could also have a dedicated slide for each of them. You could have a visual, which I highly recommend if you have mockups, if you have like a GIF, if you have some kind of prototype, put visuals in. If you have like a recording of like a demo, fantastic. Now, it's up to you if you want to do this. It really depends on how you will be sharing this roadmap, who you will be sharing it with, if you want to go to the length of doing this. I find doing this at the roadmap stage is useful because it kind of gets you thinking about how you would summarize this given product or feature or whatever the item is on a single slide, what kind of language and terms you would use when you're presenting it to people, different types of audiences. And maybe you could even reuse some of the work you put into this now for something else later. So I don't think it's harmful in, putting a little bit of time to something like this. But again, it's totally up to you. You could also just leave this in here as an appendix and just have it as a skip slide. So that's totally fine as well. And that is it for the walkthrough. I really do hope this was useful. So that is it for the walkthrough. I want to end this video by sharing a couple of tips if you are a beginner at putting together a roadmap, or maybe you're very early into your product career. Tip number one, do not feel like you have to put the product roadmap together all by yourself. It's very much a collaborative task, and you should make sure you get input from everyone else who cares about the product or has some kind of vested interest in the product. That could be someone from design, engineering, go-to-market teams, which include sales, which also include customer success managers, as well as other product teams who might be dependent on you, and maybe some other business stakeholders. You own the roadmap, and yes, ultimately you are accountable for it, but all those other teams also care about what happens with the product and its roadmap. So practically speaking, how do you do this? What I want you to do is start by putting together a very draft version of the roadmap. This is your first cut, and make sure it is titled draft roadmap or work in progress or version 1 or whatever it is, so people understand, okay, this is still being drafted. And then what you can do is you can socialize this with people at a very early stage so that you're taking the pressure off yourself and not just presenting a finalized roadmap to people and being worried about what their feedback is going to be, or maybe them being resistant to it. Make them feel like they are a part of the process and they are also having input to the roadmap, which they absolutely are. So the way that I would do this is, for me personally, I put roadmaps together in a Google slide, and I will tag the people whose input that I want. I'll tag my tech lead, my engineering managers, I'll tag designers, I'll tag other product people. You can ask them specific questions. You can ask them if they have anything additional to add that they have missed. You can ask them to clarify things that you're not sure about. So this way, you're including them in the process, but you're also being constructive with the way that you are doing it. You can ask engineering questions about how to sequence things in a certain way. You can ask them if something is feasible. You can ask engineering what effort would be involved in figuring out if something is actually feasible to do. This will definitely take a lot of the pressure off you, so try it and let me know how you go. And tip number 2 is, once you've finalized your roadmap, make sure you're able to justify everything that is in it. Make sure you are confident with the decisions you have made, and then socialize it with people. I would recommend booking a meeting with your relevant product partners, your engineering leaders, your design team, go-to-market teams, even product marketing teams. You can of course do this in one big session, but when you have these sessions individually with different cross-functional partners, you can have a slightly different conversation. So the way that you're gonna discuss the roadmap with engineering is gonna be a little bit different to how you discuss it with product marketing. So it is beneficial sometimes to do them separately, but of course it's also really great to do it as a group and have all the different cross-functional people discuss things as a whole. So think about the right combination depending on the size of your company, your team, and all the nature of all that stuff as it's relevant to your situation. But the reason I suggest doing this is because you don't want people to find out that your roadmap, it has something on it that they didn't know about and that they don't agree with once it's finalized. So when you are actually being proactive and setting up a time with them to walk them through it, again, they're kind of part of that process, and you're giving them an opportunity to be informed about why you made the decisions that you did. And of course, you can also get feedback from them at this point, because a roadmap can technically really change at any time. And it's a great way to make sure that you maintain a good relationship with these different teams. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much if you got this far. I really do appreciate it. Please leave any questions you have below about product roadmaps, requirements, prioritization, or even the template. And please share this video with anyone who you think will value from learning more about product roadmaps and how to put them together. And thank you again. I will see you in my next video.